Hi everyone, Sean Waldman with Secure Cyber Defense, and this is your weekly cyber update. Well, Ticketmaster finally and Live Nation disclosed that they did have a compromise, and this time it's affected by their database hoster, Snowflake, which held all of the information regarding the Ticketmaster and Live Nation accounts. Snowflake is a data analytics company that also hosts information from Adobe, Canva, as well as MasterCard. Right now, we know that 560 million accounts were impacted. So Snowflake is a very large data analytics company that also handles, like I said, Adobe, Canva, and MasterCard. So there could be more to this later on as far as other companies disclosing that they've had data breaches in the future. This is a very large event. Remember, AT&T had 70 million accounts compromised, and we're talking 560 million just from a Ticketmaster and Live Nation perspective. Now, of course, just the regular information about what's been taken as far as name, address, things like credit card information, what concerts you've attended, and those types of things. Of course, a threat actor is going to take advantage of the situation and use a lot of that information, especially the credit card data, that they're able to use to make payments on your behalf or make charges on your behalf. But more importantly, what happens is when threat actors get detailed information, like we were talking about the pharmacy breach from last week, where they were able to get like specific information about like your healthcare information, your diagnosis, and things like that, is threat actors can take specific advantage of those situations and send more targeted phishing emails to you. So if I know what concerts you've been to and I know, what diagnosis you've had, I can send you very specific information over email or over the phone, and that's credible information that you can confirm, right? Yes, I have been to that concert, or since they know that concert, or since they know my medical diagnosis, this must be a trusted source. So always look at it from that perspective, that's very dangerous. Of course, that they get that level of information, but also be very cautious after these breaches, specifically with emails and phone calls from people claiming that they have specific information about places you've been or things that you've been diagnosed with. So Check Point has disclosed that they have been the victim, their firewalls, of breaches to enterprise networks over VPN. And we've seen this before with Cisco. We've seen it with a number of others. We've seen it with SonicWall, Ubiquiti, Fortinet. And in this particular case, threat actors are taking advantage of old accounts that are sitting on firewalls with password-only authentication. And the reason that's important is, this is the time for firewall administrators to take a look at firewalls. VPN and SSL VPN are very common, but we need to enforce multi-factor authentication. MFA is one of the only ways that we're going to combat these types of things, and looking at things like privileged access management to maybe as an alternative to VPN or SSL VPN technology. So just a word of caution, if you've got Check Point, if you've got any of the other firewalls, please just make sure that your firmware is up to date and it's current. Make sure that your SSL VPN and your VPN that is set up on the firewall is set up with multi-factor authentication. And just take a look at your accounts and make sure that the accounts are still valid. So Christies has announced, the auction house, the very large auction house, that 500,000 potentially accounts had been compromised in a ransomware attack. And, this is always very interesting. A ransomware operator has taken advantage of somebody like Christies, which obviously we know for the most part is involved with very high-end auction. So what does that mean? That means that they probably have a lot of money, and a ransomware operator is potentially going after that. Now, Christies has taken a stance where they have not paid the ransom, and this is a very common tactic that has started happening, especially with companies that have had good backups, because honestly, there's no guarantee that if you pay the ransom, that the ransomware operator is not going to publicize your information. So this is just one of those cases where we continue to see ransomware on an all-time high. We also see companies that are pushing back a little bit harder on ransomware operators with this whole double threat where, they're threatening to take your information and they've encrypted it and they're holding it hostage and saying if you don't pay the ransom, that they're going to post it. But we have certainly seen companies that are getting information saying, well, even if I do pay the ransom, what's to say that you're not still going to post my information? So just make sure those backups are good and practice your incident response plans. Make sure that you have a good plan to respond. And our last segment today is a fluid situation. This is the part of the show where we take a little bit deeper look into water and wastewater. And in this particular case, I want to look at the Rockwell Bulletin that was released last week that is providing some information on how to secure your critical infrastructure, or in this case, your water and wastewater system externally. Some of the main things that the bulletin is looking at is making sure that you've got a good take on the assets that you have exposed externally and making sure that those assets have passwords that have been reset and that you're not exposing a piece of critical infrastructure to the internet with a default password. The other issue is just making sure that you're following guidance from CISA and the NSA and the CIA. They've all posted information about how to secure a water and wastewater plant. The EPA has posted a number of bulletins on how to do that as well. And really, for the most case, what we're seeing is just general best practices. I see a lot of water and wastewater plants that don't have an idea or don't have a really good idea of what assets, what their inventory is like inside their environment. And just remember that in order to combat a threat, knowing what assets that you have, both hardware and software, is really your only way of surviving an attack. Often on this channel, we look at the CIS controls, which is the top 18 controls. And control number 1 and control number 2 is know your hardware and know your software. So we'll have that bulletin listed in the show notes, so take a look at that if you're in the water and wastewater area. And this may also be a really good time to tell you about a new video podcast that we'll be starting called CS Cyber. C for Chad, S for Sean. You saw us on here once before, but CS Cyber will be a new video podcast and also probably a podcast on some of the other regular podcasting channels, where we will take a CISO perspective look at a number of in-depth topics. Most of these will be taken from the weekly cyber update. So this Thursday, look for the release of CS Cyber episode number 1, where we will be looking at in detail the Rockwell Bulletin that we talked about under a fluid situation under the weekly cyber update, and just getting a perspective from Chad and from myself, just some dialogue about what we've seen out in the field, and just talking a little bit more about that bulletin. So we'll see you this Thursday for CS Cyber. Well, that's all we have for today. I appreciate your time. Thank you for attending this show, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. And hey, let's be careful out there.